Have you ever wondered what it takes to be a great service assistant? Well, in today's episode of Service That Sells, we're about to find out. But first, a word from our sponsors.
A leader in staff and management training for the food service industry. Learn more about the art of profitable hospitality at servicetsells.com. Today's show is sponsored by Instruis Publishing. Instruis Publishing Company is founded on the belief that the world is safer and more secure utilizing the concept of perfection through education.
Welcome to today's episode of Service That Sells. I'm Josh Kiefer.
And I'm Sarah Tim. Thank you for joining us.
Today on this episode of Service That Sells, we're going to be speaking once again to our restaurant training consultant, Katie Wagner. And we're going to be talking about the ways that a busser or service assistant, that's what we call them now, service assistant, how they interact with a dining experience, the exact techniques that they can use to make sure that the guests are taken care of and that the job is done great. So I'm excited to hear more from her. I actually had dinner I guess it was night before last at a French place. Do you like French food?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, it's the classic. And it wasn't stuffy. It definitely was a more elevated sort of menu, a little fancier, but it wasn't stuffy.
Nice.
But I will say that the food was great. It's all about the sauces with the French food. It was great. I would try to replicate it, but I don't have that kind of training. But the food was delicious. And I will say this: there was a service assistant, a young lady that so many times throughout the evening, throughout the meal, there were several courses. When I needed something, I didn't even have to ask. She was there either with new flatware or she was there to help me with something. And even we had a very specific question. This time it was about a particular wine pairing, and she knew what the answer was, so she provided that. So that's just an example.
That's great. That's a great example of what a service assistant really adds to the whole dining experience.
Yeah.
I never thought that a service assistant would need to know all that extra, but it really does. I mean, if your guests have a question right then and there, you can't go wrong by making sure that you have all that information on hand.
It was great. I also want to say that you look great today.
Oh, I thank you, Josh. I love how we matched our purples today.
It was by accident. we are going to prom later on. But hey, before we get to those festivities, we are going to go to Katie in the training studio.
That's right.
And she's going to teach us all the ins and outs to being a perfect service assistant. Katie.
Service assistants are sometimes thought of as the team members who are seen but not heard. Wrong. Service assistants have contact with guests throughout the entire dining experience. By turning those contact points into well-managed moments of truth, you have the power to turn an average guest experience into an exceptional one. Smile whenever you're interacting with guests and always maintain a positive attitude. Many of your opportunities to improve the guest experience will come in the form of questions guests ask you. The key is to be prepared. Take a look at some of these common questions. Guests looking for the restroom will ask the first person they see, which could very well be you. This question indicates that the guest may be new to the restaurant, so take this opportunity to set the expectation for exemplary service. Don't just point in the direction of the restrooms or give a quick reply. Try something like this instead.
Right this way.
Guests often discover that they need assistance right after they sit down and after the host has left the table. While you're moving around the dining room or working to clear and clean tables, guests may ask you to help them with their coats or validate their parking, perhaps bring them extra napkins or flatware, or a variety of other needs. While the work you're in the middle of is important, serving the guests directly is your top priority. Like this.
I'd be happy to take care of that for you.
If it's part of your job to fill water glasses, it's also part of your job to do it in a way that prevents the spread of germs. Always handle glasses from the base. Never put your fingers near the rim of the glass, and don't touch the pitcher to the glass that you're filling. Try to keep water glasses filled throughout the meal. But if guests do have to ask you for a refill, use it as an opportunity to make a positive impression. Instead of just nodding and filling the glass, try this.
May I get anyone else a refill or another drink?
Guests may also ask you about the menu, especially if you're filling water glasses while they're deciding what they want to eat. As a service assistant, this is an excellent opportunity for you to exceed expectations. Instead of reading from the menu or putting off the question with, "I'm not sure, but your server will be right with you," be prepared to answer guest questions about the menu. Like this.
Everything's great here, but my favorite is the chicken marsala with angel hair pasta. The pan-seared tilapia is also very popular.
Guests asking for their server are likely either frustrated or impatient. Either way, this is a critical moment of truth that you can turn into a positive guest experience. Never just say, "Sure, I'll send someone right over." A guest in need is an opportunity indeed. Find out why the guest needs a server. If you can take action yourself, it will save time and show the guest you're part of a team that's committed to exceptional service. For example, if a guest needs a server because something is missing from their meal, provide immediate assistance like this.
I'm so sorry about that. I'll go get you an extra side of dressing and bring it right to you. Is there anything else I can help you with?
The bottom line is this. Although you have a job to do bussing and clearing tables, you are also responsible for moments of truth that involve serving the guest directly. Always have a friendly and helpful attitude. Smile when you interact with guests. There's no room for "that's not my job" when your goal is to exceed guests' expectations in every moment of truth. Always put the immediate needs of guests before anything else that you need to do. No matter what type of restaurant you have, guests have high expectations for cleanliness, and you have an obligation to exceed those expectations. While it's everyone's responsibility to maintain a clean and inviting restaurant, bussing tables is a critical moment of truth that may rest almost solely on your shoulders. Make sure you're fully informed about your restaurant's specific policies and guidelines for bussing tables. Here are some general tips to keep in mind. No one likes sitting at a table with dirty dishes. Remove the dishes after each course. A good general rule to follow is to make sure that the entire party has finished eating before you begin to clear. If you start to clear early, some guests are going to feel rushed and form a negative impression of the restaurant. Use patience and good timing to make guests feel that they have all the time in the world. It is okay to clear a plate before everyone has finished eating if a guest has set the plate at the edge of the table. Guests may also indicate that they're finished by laying their fork and knife across their plates. In these situations, ask guests if they would like you to remove the plate. When removing dishes as guests continue their meals, handle the items you're clearing in the same way you would if you were serving or setting the table. Pick glasses up by the stem or base. Never stick your fingers into the glasses as you collect them. Handle silverware towards the bottom as well. If it's your policy to leave the fork at the table for the next course, do so discreetly. When using a tray, arrange the dishes on the tray carefully so that they will not topple over as you walk away. Do not scrape and stack dishes in front of the customer. This instantly turns their amazing meal to garbage right before their eyes. Bus only one table at a time. Sometimes guests who are trying to be helpful will hand you dishes as you clear. Take as many as you can, but don't overload yourself. Politely explain to the guest that you'll be back for the rest. If you carry too many at once, you could create a safety hazard for both you and your guests. Once all dishes from one course are cleared away, help the server prepare the table for the next course. You may need to remove crumbs and soiled napkins from the table and bring new utensils, napkins, and condiments. Working as a team, you'll exceed guests' expectations and leave a positive impression on your guests. If a guest has finished the main course but has leftovers, offer a box. Or even better, take the plate to the kitchen and box the leftover food yourself if your restaurant policy allows that. Make sure you understand your restaurant's policy on clearing away dessert and coffee dishes. Typically, you can leave these on the table unless guests push them to the side or ask you to take them. Removing dessert dishes implies to guests that you want them to leave. You'll leave a positive impression with guests if they know they can take their time and move at their own pace. Refill coffee and water glasses as needed. If there's a spill at the table, clean it up as soon as possible. Downplay the incident and reassure the guests that it's no problem to get it taken care of. If you're responsible for a spill while clearing the table, apologize and clean it up immediately. Regardless of how the spill happened, remain pleasant and clean it quickly with as little disruption to guests as possible. Replace any napkins that may have been used and work with the server to replace beverages if needed. Sweep or mop around the table as necessary and put up caution signs if there's a slipping hazard. Remember, clearing the table is an important moment of truth. Every time you're at the table, you have an opportunity to exceed guests' expectations. While clearing tables, add value to a guest's visit when you can, and do your work swiftly and quietly. Never remark on a customer's plate with a comment such as, "Wow, I guess you were hungry." It's okay to show guests that you care about their experience with a question such as, "Did you enjoy your meal?" Smile when interacting with guests and always be friendly and helpful.
I certainly hope you enjoyed that segment from Katie as she talked about all of the work and the detail that goes into being a great service assistant. Yeah, I think so many things jumped out at me when we were watching her piece there. She was performing at the studio. I think a couple things. That's not my job. That mentality, there's no room for that. And I can't emphasize that enough. I love when I'm in a business, a restaurant, or whatever it is, and everyone there wants to help. Sometimes you may not have the answer, and that's okay. But saying to someone, "I'll find the answer for you right away," or, "How can I help you for this time being?" or "I'll be right back with that answer." Whatever it is, knowing that attitude exists.
Right.
I guess it's kind of a team kind of attitude.
Definitely a team effort. The whole restaurant experience, it seems to me, is, starts with that entrance, hostess, and then the service assistant and the server themselves as well. It all makes such a difference to the guests. And I think the whole concept of just anticipating guests' needs when they walk through the door is so important, and especially important for the service assistant, because they want to make sure that they are always anticipating what the guest might ask next or what kind of service they might need next, as far as taking leftovers away or getting them extra condiments, anything like that. Extra napkins is something I always need.
Now, Katie did mention a don't, and it would be if you were to make a comment to a guest looking at their plate saying, "Wow, I guess you were hungry." Has that ever happened to you? Because I'll be honest with you, I think it might have happened to me before, and maybe not even so much in those words, but because I eat a lot, and I sometimes eat fast. And so I have seen, maybe not, I've not heard those statements, but you can talk with your eyes. And there have been times where they have gone to clear my plate, and I've seen this, and I'll do it for you. Okay. Like one of those takes. And I know, so here's the thing, we all eat at our own speeds, and we all eat at different paces, and pacing is a very big part of a great dining experience. So I would just encourage those fantastic service assistants that if someone eats a little faster than others, just to anticipate those needs and pace with them.
Well, true.
You know who I'm talking to.
Since we're on the subject of pet peeves, my pet peeves.
Oh, is that where we went? Pet peeves.
Well, you brought it up. I think one thing that annoys me is if
we're going to be here for a while.
are no, if I'm not completely finished with my meal, because I am one of those people that takes a little bit longer to work at my meal. And when one time I had a service assistant come up and just bust the plate right out from under me, and I wasn't quite finished yet. They didn't even ask or anything like that, and so I just had to say goodbye to my food, which is fine. I might have been boxing it to take home for later, but they didn't even ask to box it. So I just think that attention to detail is so important. You want to make your guests feel satisfied and comfortable, and as if they have all time to just sit there and continue to gab and eat.
I had a server once tell me when they seated me in the booth, and I was taking a little bit of time, and I was aware of that, and I said, "I hope I'm not taking your table up." And he looked at me and he said, "This is your table as long as you're here." And I thought that mentality, you never want anyone to feel rushed in that dining experience. So anyway,
that's a great point.
Those were a lot of good takeaways from Katie, and I really appreciate those.
And I will also say, in my experience, most of the service assistants I have encountered have been extremely accommodating. So aside from those couple experiences we've had in our past, just an encouragement out there to all of you service assistants to just remember to anticipate those guest needs and make sure their dining experience is a great and exceptional
It's appreciated.
one.
It's very much appreciated. Well, you're not going to want to miss. We have more coming from this on this same topic.
That's right. Coming up, Katie is going to talk to us about how to properly clean the table after the guest exits. But first, let's have another quick word from our sponsors.
Hi, I'm Jim Egbert, the CEO and publisher of Instruis Publishing Company. We publish food training manuals. This includes food defense, food safety training, and food HACCP. I'm happy to report that we partnered with RTO, Ready Training Online, to bring to the industry the best possible material, partnered with the best possible learning management system. By using our material and RTO's training platform, you can be sure that you're providing the best possible training for your employees.
Hi, I'm Susan Algio, one of the authors of the SURE Food Safety Employee Manual for Food Service and Retail Establishments. Here's a quick SURE tip for you. When reheating a food product for hot holding, it's important to reheat the food to 165 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds within 2 hours. If the food product is commercially processed, it needs to be reheated to 135 degrees.
I'm Rick Thielig. I'm the general manager of CPD Energy Corporation. We're a petroleum distributor out of the New York area, marketing in the states of New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. We have a location, a gasoline station in Waterbury, Connecticut. About 3 months ago, a consumer came into the property and with a minivan, opened up the back of the minivan, and had a garbage container in the back of the van. Proceeded to take the diesel nozzle and to fill up the container in the van. The container and the diesel didn't quite like each other, I guess a way to put it, and the container started to disintegrate and ended up with a big spill of diesel all over the parking lot of this facility. Our employee mobilized, got the environmental snakes, built a little dam, put the Speedy Dry on top of it, stopped the flow of product from getting down the road into a catch basin. The beauty of the story as it relates to RTO is that our environmental manager, a day or two later, went out to interview the employee and asked, how did you know what to do and how to build the dam and put the Speedy Dry down? The employee was quite emphatic that the reason that this person knew how to do that was that he had watched the RTO video on our environmental section, and it was, very, very clear and definitive in how to do that. So a quick example of RTO working firsthand.
Welcome back to Service That Sells. On this next segment, we're going to we're going to hear from Katie Wagner again as she tells us a little bit more, goes into depth even more about the expertise of a service assistant. She's going to be telling us exactly the proper ways to clean a table after a guest has left. So we're going to go to the training studio right now and speak with Katie.
You just learned that you should never make a guest feel rushed when you're clearing tables. But once you've thanked guests for coming in and they've left the dining room, it's time to turn that table. Quickly cleaning tables after guests leave keeps the flow of guests in the restaurant moving at a steady pace. Cleaning and sanitizing eating areas is an important moment of truth that can affect guests' perceptions of their entire experience. Again, make sure you're fully informed about your restaurant's specific policies and guidelines for cleaning tables. Here are some general tips. Always keep a filled bucket or spray bottle with sanitary solution and a clean towel at your busing station. Test the solution periodically or as often as instructed by your manager. Dip the towel in the solution, wring out the excess water, and place the towel in your bus tub. You should also have a clean and dry towel with you. When you get to the table, promptly and quietly remove any dishes and debris. Be sure to keep your bus tub on a chair or booth to keep it out of view of customers. Wipe crumbs into your hand or a napkin and use the wet towel to wipe down the surface of the table and chairs or booths. Replace the towel whenever it becomes soiled. Check condiment trays, salt and pepper shakers, table tents, and any other items that will stay on the table. Pick them up to thoroughly clean under them. Clean up sticky areas on the table and chairs or booth. Once you've cleaned the table and seating areas, make sure they're dry. Use a clean, dry towel and wipe down all the surfaces again. Guests who sit down on a wet chair or rest their arms on a wet table will be starting out their dining experience on a negative note, and we don't want that. High chairs and booster seats must also be cleaned and sanitized between uses. Follow the same procedure using the towel and sanitary solution to wipe down the entire surface. Service assistants are at unoccupied tables more than anyone else. While you're cleaning, inspect the furniture to make sure it's in good condition, level, with no splinters or cracks that might hurt a guest or collect bacteria. If you notice an issue, take care of it if you can, or report it to your manager. Also, look around the table area for food or cutlery on the floor, and pick it up immediately to avoid tripping hazards. Sweep around the table if necessary. The busing area is your domain. Keep it clean and organized. Wipe down the counter, trash cans, and any bus pans to keep them free of spills and grime. Empty trash cans and bus pans regularly. Clean and inspect trays and tray stands to keep them in good condition. The host staff should not seat guests at tables that have not been bussed and cleaned, but sometimes it can happen. If it does, you can turn this potentially negative moment of truth into a positive one. Greet the guest, apologize for the inconvenience, and get the table ready for them as quickly as you can. As you wipe down the table, be very careful not to brush any debris on the guests. Make sure to leave the table dry. As you learned earlier in this lesson, in the midst of bussing and cleaning tables, you're also responsible for delivering exceptional service to guests. To promote proper sanitation, wash your hands frequently. If you're bussing or cleaning tables and are asked to help serve food or beverage, you must wash your hands before serving guests. If it's true that success is a sum of small parts repeated, then all service assistants are destined for greatness. With the help of your team when needed, mastering the moments of truth involved with bussing and cleaning tables will have a tremendous impact on guests. When you're prepared to provide exceptional service to guests and perform your bussing and cleaning duties to exceed guests' expectations, you're contributing to the success of the entire restaurant. No job is more or less important than any other in the restaurant. It takes commitment to every moment of truth to reach your goal of creating happy guests who tell their friends about the restaurant and can't wait to come back. Great job today.
Thank you so much for that information, Katie. Well, this has been another very successful episode of Service That Sells. If you'll remember, in this episode, we talked about how to provide exceptional service as a service assistant, and also how to properly bus tables, and how to properly clean those tables after the guests leave.
You know, I think the clean tables, getting them cleaned and reset quickly, she focused on that. That's a huge thing, because all of the time and the work that goes into making sure your restaurant is presentable, it can be undone if you leave those tables dirty and not reset. So I think that was a good point. I like that. I love a clean table.
Right.
I like diners. I'm a fan of diners.
I am as well.
I pretty much there's not a lot of styles of restaurants that I'll go to a food truck, I'll go to a 5-star restaurant, but
And
diners.
trust me, he
even
goes everywhere.
I think I'm a hungry boy. Listen, so here's the thing though. The thing is, even if I'm at a diner and it doesn't have, you know, all the cutlery and the crystal and all that, if that table is clean, I just feel like I feel like it's inviting. So I think what they say, cleanliness is next to godliness. So I think that's it. And you know what Katie said, which I love, there's no job less important or more important. Like each job in the restaurant industry is just as important. I know of a chef who has worked in some of the finest restaurants in Philadelphia and New York. Really? Yes, the owners of these restaurants are on television and they've written books.
Wow.
So he's been in these restaurants, but here's the thing. He mentioned to me about washing dishes, like the other night when I was in the dish room washing dishes. And I said, wait, you're an executive chef. And he said, no job is unimportant in the restaurant industry. So I think that's, I mean, to see, I think,
Very
first of all,
important.
he was a good example of a leader who leads by example. So to the point, there's no job that's less important. So
Right. I appreciate this whole bit about service assistants. I myself am not always into the restaurant industry. I've done a few things, but I don't know a ton. And I mean, but you wouldn't be able to tell from this show.
No, she's an expert.
I am an expert.
She is.
But I always thought it was so interesting how every job is so crucial in the restaurant, and especially the service assistant, always making sure they have an eye and an ear on every table. I know I'm a singer, and so I always...
a lovely singer.
Well, thank you very much. I always drink a lot of water just to keep my vocal cords in shape. And one of the things I don't like is when my water glass continues to remain empty for a duration of time. So if that service assistant can always just keep an eye on me as a guest, making sure my water is always refilled, all guests in general, I think that's so important to add to the overall dining experience.
You mentioned being a singer. We've both been on stage before. We've
Yes.
both been on stage together before. I think of service assistants and servers on the floor of the restaurant as being on stage. So even if Katie mentioned a scenario of a service assistant having a table that wasn't reset and guests have arrived, that's a tough place to be in. It's a moment where your composure may crack, you may sweat or whatever. The thing is, if you're on stage, if you have the mentality of, wait, I am on now, you don't let that show.
That's right.
And we both had situations thrown at us that we didn't anticipate, and we certainly had to roll with it. So I love that mentality, and I think to just keep that composure. I've told you that I don't like flying. Have I told you that before? Just nod. So
Yes.
I don't like flying. I think I'm going to die each time I get on a plane. And I toured once for a year or so with a company, and we flew many, many times. And each time I got on the plane, I really thought my life was going to end. But here I am. So here's the thing.
Defied all odds.
See, I would look to the flight attendant when we would have rough air or turbulence to see if their composure would break. And even though I was nervous, if I saw that they held their composure, I knew I was okay. So
That's true.
I apply that story to just making sure that that composure is held, because honestly, even if you're weeded or there's a lot going on and perhaps things aren't going exactly how you would want your shift to go, if you can hold that composure, that will read to your guests. And I think that's a big step toward ensuring your guests have a great dining experience.
Very true. So how about next episode? What do we have coming up here?
Oh, it's interesting. We're going to delve into the back of house. So as a service assistant and as a server, you have your server station. There's a lot of cleaning that goes on, and there's tasks and things that have to be done in the back of house. So we're going to, Katie's going to help us, and we're going to delve into what it means to make sure that is clean and kept up to standards. So I think it'll be a great episode.
Well, sounds exciting. We'll see you next time on Service That Sells.